I'm Rachel, 37, and for the past decade and a half, I've climbed the corporate ladder as a senior executive at a premier financial consulting firm in Manhattan. This story revolves around the tangled web of relationships between me, my sister Victoria, who's 47, my elderly parents now in their late 70s, and a house that became the epicenter of devastating family warfare. To understand how everything unraveled, I need to take you back to where it all began. My parents were approaching 50 when I arrived unexpectedly into their world. Victoria had already claimed her throne as their 10-year-old princess, and according to my mother's frequent reminders, she was more than sufficient for their needs. These words weren't delivered with cruelty, but with a matter-of-fact tone that somehow cut deeper than outright hostility. We hadn't prepared for another child, my mother would mention casually while organizing Victoria's piano recitals or reviewing her honor roll certificates. These seemingly innocent observations became the soundtrack of my childhood, a constant reminder that I was life's unplanned footnote in their carefully scripted story. If not for my paternal grandparents' intervention, I might never have experienced unconditional love. While my parents viewed me as an unwanted obligation, my grandparents saw my arrival as their greatest blessing. The morning routine became a ritual of rejection. My father would hand me over to my grandfather with the words, "Here's your project, Dad. She's your responsibility now," keys already jangling as he prepared his escape to the office. My grandparents' modest home transformed into my sanctuary, where warmth and acceptance filled every corner. They ensured I was nourished, collected me from school, guided me through homework, and spent countless hours at the neighborhood playground. My grandfather, a former mathematics professor, would spend evenings teaching me the beauty of numerical patterns and logical thinking. "Numbers don't deceive you," he'd explain, his weathered hands guiding mine through complex equations. They reveal truth more honestly than most people ever will. Meanwhile, my grandmother would sit beside me each afternoon, patiently explaining homework concepts with the dedication of someone who genuinely cared about my understanding. As a retired educator herself, she possessed infinite patience and wisdom. "Education becomes your permanent treasure," she'd say with gentle firmness. "No one can ever steal knowledge from your mind." She also introduced me to culinary arts, transforming cooking from a chore into an expression of creativity and affection. Those precious hours in their kitchen, sharing stories about my school day while learning to measure ingredients precisely, remain among my most treasured memories. My parents would arrive eventually, usually late and visibly irritated by the inconvenience of collecting me. "Rachel, sweetheart," my grandmother would whisper as she embraced me goodnight, "you're the most wonderful thing that ever entered our lives." In her loving arms, I could almost forget that I was unwanted elsewhere. They became my emotional foundation, providing the stability and affection that were glaringly absent in my actual home. Sometimes, my grandfather would add with a knowing smile, "Life's greatest gifts arrive without invitation." At home, I learned to exist as background noise while Victoria prepared for her brilliant future. My sister wasn't malicious or deliberately cruel. She simply acted as though I didn't exist. She'd stretch across our shared sofa, chatting animatedly with friends about boys and college applications, completely oblivious to my presence as I played quietly with my toys in the corner. The disparity in treatment was unmistakable and consistent. I'd overhear my mother's proud declarations during phone conversations with relatives. "Victoria achieved straight A's again," or "Victoria made the varsity debate team," or "Victoria received early admission to her top choice university." They attended every one of her school events, science exhibitions, debate tournaments, and academic ceremonies. When I'd ask about my own school activities, they'd offer practiced excuses. "We're exhausted from work," or "You understand we're busy, don't you?" My grandparents stepped in as my personal cheerleading section, attending every school function with genuine enthusiasm and pride radiating from their faces. When Victoria departed for university, I harbored hope that things might change at home. Perhaps, As the daughter who remained, my parents would finally notice me. I couldn't have been more mistaken. I transformed from invisible to indentured servant. At 14, my mother would call out before I could even remove my backpack after school. "Rachel, the house needs attention. Start with the bathrooms." I inherited all of Victoria's former responsibilities plus numerous additional tasks. I became intimately familiar with every setting on our washing machine, and it became my daily companion. Cleaning, cooking, and maintaining a household for parents who barely acknowledged my existence felt like an endless cycle of unpaid labor. If I showed the slightest hesitation, my father would declare, "You live under this roof, so you contribute." Your sister always fulfilled her obligations. By 15, the responsibility escalated from cleaning to cooking. The transition wasn't gradual. One morning my mother simply announced, "You're mature enough now. We expect dinner to be prepared when we return from work." Despite these overwhelming domestic responsibilities, I maintained exceptional academic performance. My teachers recognized my aptitude for economics and mathematics, encouraging me to participate in various academic competitions. My grandfather dedicated extra time to teaching me advanced concepts far beyond my grade level. "You possess a remarkable gift with numbers," he'd say, his eyes sparkling with pride. "Never let anyone convince you otherwise." College became my escape fantasy. Each night, after completing household duties, I'd retreat to my bedroom and browse university websites, imagining myself walking across distant campuses, far from the endless chores and cold silence that defined my daily existence. My academic dedication paid off despite my household obligations. I maintained perfect grades, and at 16, acceptance letters arrived from several prestigious universities, including institutions renowned for their exceptional finance programs. Victoria's engagement announcement came on a Sunday afternoon. She burst through our front door, dragging a tall, impeccably dressed man behind her. "Mom, Dad, meet Christopher. We're getting engaged," she squealed with excitement. You'd think someone had announced a lottery victory. My mother erupted in tears of joy, while my father immediately reached for his phone to share the news with extended family. They literally leaped from their seats in celebration. "We'll cover every expense," my mother exclaimed, embracing Victoria tightly. "Our firstborn's wedding must be absolutely perfect." For months, our home became wedding central. Every conversation revolved around guest lists, venues, and floral arrangements. Money flowed like water for expensive gowns, premium vendors, and top-tier everything. Although my grandparents attended the ceremony, they didn't seem to appreciate the lavish display. My grandfather simply shook his head at the champagne fountain, while I noticed my grandmother frowning at an ice sculpture that probably cost more than a semester's college tuition. They likely anticipated what was coming and kept their opinions private. The day my acceptance letters arrived, I shared the wonderful news with my parents. 3 envelopes lay spread across our dinner table as my heart raced with excitement. "That's pleasant news," my mother murmured without looking up from her meal. "However, we cannot finance your education. We exhausted our savings on your sister's wedding and even secured a loan. Nothing remains for college." I stammered, "But you paid for Victoria's education," barely whispering the words. "That situation was different," my mother replied with condescension. "We recognized her potential." The silence that followed was deafening. "You should find employment, accumulate savings, and apply for student loans. That's what responsible adults do," my father stated between bites. I had never dared leave the dinner table without permission before. With trembling hands, I grabbed my phone and called my grandmother. Within minutes, I was crying in their familiar front doorway. As my grandfather listened to my story, his expression hardened, though I couldn't quite interpret the gleam in his eyes. After I finished explaining everything, they exchanged a meaningful glance. My grandfather took my hand and said, "Rachel, we've been saving for your education since your birth." We anticipated something like this would happen. He disappeared into his study and returned with a folder. Inside were bank statements showing years of careful saving. You can attend any of those universities. We've got everything covered. That evening, I packed my essentials and moved in with my grandparents permanently. When I informed my parents of my decision, they were downstairs watching television and barely glanced up. "Do whatever you think is best," my mother said, her gaze fixed on the screen. Did I detect relief in her voice? The years that followed were transformative. I enrolled in one of the nation's top business schools to study financial analysis. Perhaps witnessing my parents' poor financial management inspired my passion for doing things correctly. My professors noticed my enthusiasm and natural financial instincts. Soon I was staying after classes to discuss complex financial concepts. For the first time in my life, someone besides my grandparents saw genuine potential in me. During college, I secured prestigious internships at major financial institutions. Each summer brought new opportunities and challenges. Senior managers were impressed by my analytical skills and attention to detail. After one performance review at Goldman Sachs, my supervisor said, "You have natural instincts for this field. We'd be delighted to have you return next summer." Except for regular calls with my grandparents, I focused entirely on my studies and career, rarely thinking about my family. After graduation, I was hired by one of the city's leading financial firms. The starting salary exceeded my wildest imagination. I found a small, clean, secure one-bedroom apartment. Every morning, I felt grateful that I only needed to prepare breakfast for myself. As I threw myself into each new challenge, my career flourished. I received bonuses and promotions I never could have dreamed of in my youth. Within 5 years, I advanced to a senior position, managing complex portfolios and building major client relationships. I became known throughout the industry for strategic thinking and analytical precision. Every achievement felt like silent validation that my parents had misjudged my potential completely. Meanwhile, I learned through occasional conversations with my grandparents that Victoria's marketing career wasn't progressing as she'd hoped. Christopher, Victoria's husband, struggled with job stability. They constantly asked my parents for financial assistance. "Your mother emptied her retirement account last month to help them with rent," my grandmother mentioned during one of our weekly conversations. They simply cannot refuse her requests. After a year, the situation deteriorated further. Despite our parents' help, Victoria and Christopher could no longer afford their rent. They moved back to my childhood home with their 7-year-old twins. My parents, who had once been so proud of Victoria's potential, now had to support her entire family in addition to their golden child. I maintained my distance, focusing on building my own life and career. Every bonus, promotion, and successful deal served as silent confirmation that I wasn't the failure my parents had predicted. By my mid-30s, I had substantial savings and investments, including enough for a down payment on my own home. Then everything changed. My grandfather died, suddenly from a massive heart attack. It was devastating. He had been more than a grandfather. He was the father figure who supported me when no one else would. After that, my grandmother, who had shared over 50 years with him, seemed to lose her spark. She followed him less than 2 months later. In every meaningful way, they had been my real parents, and suddenly they were gone. At the funeral home, while I was arranging my grandmother's service, I heard my mother's voice behind me. "Rachel, would you like some assistance with the arrangements?" When I turned around, she was standing there, looking older and more worn than I remembered. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave, but something in her expression stopped me. "Sure," I replied. "That would be helpful." Over the next few days, as we planned the service, my parents began opening up. They admitted they were struggling financially. One afternoon, while we were selecting flowers, my father confessed, "We haven't been financially stable since retirement." He continued, explaining that they barely made ends meet before mentioning Victoria's twins. I understood that my sister and her family still lived with them, depending on their dwindling income. 1 week after we buried my grandmother, We gathered in a wood-paneled office for the will reading. Victoria and Christopher slouched in recliners beside my parents, while I sat across from them. The tension was thick enough to cut, and the room smelled of furniture polish and old papers. None of us realized at the time that what followed would trigger a series of events that would permanently alter our family dynamics. After adjusting his glasses, Mr. Williams, the attorney, began reading in a monotone voice. I expected standard legal language, but what came next made everyone pay attention. To our beloved granddaughter Rachel, we leave our house at 4721 Oak Avenue and the sum of $150,000. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother gripped my father's arm until her knuckles turned white, and Victoria's mouth fell open. After clearing his throat, Mr. Williams continued. He looked at my mother and said, "There's also a personal note from Mrs. Henderson to her daughter Margaret." The message read, "Remember, Margaret, we provided you with $200,000 when you needed it most. Just as we respected your needs then, we expect you to respect our final decision." My mother's face flushed red, then turned pale. Victoria and Christopher exchanged anxious glances while my father stared at the floor. In the parking lot, my parents approached me after the attorney had finished and collected his paperwork. The calm demeanor they displayed during funeral preparations had been replaced by something desperate. "Rachel, honey, you must understand that we always assumed we'd inherit the house," my mother said with a trembling voice. "We're struggling financially, but we were counting on it. The mortgage, Victoria's family's expenses, we could really use that house." My father continued, running his fingers through his gray hair, talking about how Victoria's children needed a yard to play in. Victoria joined in as well, but I simply got in my car and drove away. Over the following weeks, I contemplated my grandparents' final gift. My life was well established near the city, and while the house I inherited held countless precious memories, it was too large for me alone. Meanwhile, I learned about my parents' increasing financial difficulties through our weekly conversations. Supporting Victoria and her family had drained their retirement funds, and they were finding it increasingly difficult to pay their own mortgage. After considerable thought, I decided I would purchase my parents a better house, a single-story home with a lovely garden but easier to maintain, using money from selling my grandparents' house combined with my own savings. Something comfortable for their retirement years. I was startled by their response when I shared my idea with them. They actually began crying with happiness. After several weeks of house hunting, we found the perfect place, a beautiful ranch-style home with wide doorways and no stairs in a quiet neighborhood. My parents couldn't stop expressing how thrilled they were. After the purchase was finalized, my father said, "We need a proper housewarming party. It's the least we can do. Let us handle all the arrangements." "That sounds wonderful," I replied, planning to present them with the deed at the celebration. "Just let me know when." Weeks passed. Despite my busy schedule, I kept expecting an invitation. "Oh," my mother would say, "we're still planning. You know these things take time." My father would add, "We want it to be perfect. We'll let you know soon." Their evasive responses frustrated me somehow. One evening, after another vague phone call from my mother, I decided to search for Victoria's name on Facebook. We weren't connected on social media, and I hadn't viewed her profile in years. Posted just hours earlier. "Can't wait for Mom and Dad's housewarming party this Saturday. So excited to celebrate with everyone in this gorgeous home." Dozens of friends and family members had confirmed their attendance in the comments. Photos showed caterers being hired and decorations being arranged. This was hardly a spontaneous gathering. Weeks of planning had gone into it. With slightly trembling fingers, I called my mother. "Hello, Mom. I wanted to ask about the housewarming party. Do you have a date set yet?" "Oh, sweetheart, not quite yet," she said smoothly. "Probably in a few weeks. We're still working out the details." Everyone except me, apparently. As that Saturday approached, I had to make a decision. Should I confront them? Should I let it go? How could they exclude me from the celebration after everything that had happened, after I had bought them this house? I would find out eventually, but not in the way I had expected. On Saturday, I parked a block away from the house I had purchased for my parents. Through the windows, I could see dozens of people mingling, Victoria's social circle, friends, and relatives. My father was giving tours of the house I bought while my mother, wearing her special occasion pearls, greeted guests at the entrance. Twinkling lights and welcome banners decorated the home. Laughter and music spilled onto the street. It was clear they had spent weeks organizing this housewarming celebration to which I wasn't invited. For a while, I sat in my car watching. Victoria's twins were chasing each other around crowds of adults who were admiring them. Through the large bay window, I could see moving boxes with Victoria's handwriting stacked in the corner. The relocation of her family's belongings had already begun. I took a deep breath and entered through the side door. The house was filled with the aroma of flowers and catered food. I followed my father's voice to the living room, where he was addressing a group of people. After all these years of hard work, we finally made it, bought our dream home. My mother enthusiastically added, "Don't forget Victoria. She contributed so much to the down payment." Such a thoughtful daughter, always putting family first, unlike some people. In response to someone's question about me, she continued, "Our younger daughter hasn't been any help at all. Too focused on her career to care about family." Heat rose to my face as I stood in the doorway. Everyone stared when I said, "Actually, I think you have that completely backwards." There was dead silence in the room. My father was the first to recover, forcing a tight smile. "Madison, what a surprise. Especially since you forgot to invite me to the housewarming party for the house I purchased," I said, walking into the room. The silence stretched longer. Christopher, Victoria's husband, quickly became curious about why everyone looked so distressed. One of the twins tugged at Victoria's sleeve. "You bought it?" "Yes, but it's ours now." "You can't expect eternal gratitude," my mother said with a hint of harshness. "That's right," my father added, gaining confidence. The heads around him nodded in agreement. "And frankly, you're not welcome here. This is a family gathering, and Victoria and her family will be living here too," my mother said. "They've already sold their house. It's all arranged. The twins need a stable home." I pulled a folder from my bag and held out the ownership and deed documents. "You seem confused about something," I said. "This house belongs to me. I never signed it over to you." My mother's face changed from pale to ashen. My father began rambling about his responsibilities to his family. Victoria's confident smile cracked as she realized her plans were falling apart. Despite my shaking hands, I continued, maintaining a steady voice. "I was planning to give it to you tonight. I thought this could be a fresh start for all of us. Instead, you've shown me nothing has changed." When my mother said, "You can't do this," her voice became a screech. "We're your parents." "No," I said quietly. "You're just the people who gave birth to me. My real parents, my grandparents, taught me that family means more than blood. They also taught me about finances, which is why I own this house and you don't." I turned to address the shocked guests. "I'm sorry, but this party is over. This is my house, and I'm asking everyone to leave." My parents, Victoria, Christopher, the twins, and all their guests left in tears. From the porch, I watched them drive away one by one until the street was empty. In the yard, the decorative lights continued to twinkle mockingly. Inside, half-empty drinks and abandoned food plates covered every surface. The house, which was supposed to be my gift of reconciliation, had become the final breaking point in our relationship. A few weeks later, I discovered they had bought an apartment using proceeds from selling their previous home. 3 generations crowded into a 2-bedroom space when Victoria, Christopher, and the twins moved in with them. They tried calling me constantly at first. Their voicemails alternated between angry accusations, "You've become heartless, just like your grandparents warned us you would," and guilt trips, "How could you do this to your own family?" I blocked their phone numbers, emails, and social media accounts. The house now sits empty. I have an appointment with a real estate agent tomorrow. It's not worth trying to repair everything. Like old photographs in a dusty album, some relationships are better left in the past. I've made a promise to myself that when I eventually have children of my own, they will never need to compete for my love or vie for my attention. Unlike my parents, I will love my children equally and unconditionally, just as my grandparents loved me. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more real-life stories that will shock and inspire you.